Potential concerns when we talk about end ranges of the joint. So first of all, we talk about end range, so that deep knee flexion and that top end knee extension. So, you know, common concerns when you think about, again, it falls into those two areas of performance and injury. So if we talk about performance point of view, it's when we talk about deep range, so in full knee flexion, you know, what you got to understand is the biomechanics behind muscle contractions at those ranges. So when we start talking about prime movers versus agonist muscles, you know, in that deep flexion, one of the big things you need to be thinking about is the relationship of VM, VL, understanding that at that deep flex range, rec fem is a prime mover. It's outside of its biomechanical efficient range, and you're reliant on that VM, VL movement and that relationship. So from a performance point of view, what we normally find is if there's breakdowns in that, what we get is an entire postural shift to allow the body to get the hip over the knee more, bringing that knee over the toes to allow for rec fem to engage in a more biomechanical position. The issues that we get with that then is performance-wise, we get a decrease in force, and more importantly, we get a slowing down of the movement. So if we're talking about jumping and we're talking about like vertical lift or even horizontal lift, if we're not engaging through there, then we slow the range down, which slows down our ballistic engagement, which causes kind of performance deficits. Other things that you've got to look at as well, or another good example of where we see these kind of problems, is when we look at Olympic lifting in those bottom ranges. You know, when we're in that catch position, what happens is we get a break in force production, which means the whole movement slows down. We lose momentum, which can have seriously detrimental effects on performance. From an injury point of view, our risks then at that deep flex position is that we get a imbalance between VM and VL. So VL becomes a dominant muscle because it's far larger than VM. As a result, it shifts the positioning of the knee and the femur, which can lead to tightening of VL, weakness of VM, which can cause tracking issues with the patella, leading to posterior pole pains and stuff like that. When we start talking about top range stuff as well, so into that full extension, it's important to remember that, you know, VM is a prime mover muscle. It only works in that last 10 degrees of extension. So if we're not getting control in that extension, we run a risk of atrophy, which then can destabilize the entire knee. So, you know, training and programming around that becomes really important. You know, something to remember, if you are dealing with these high explosive sports, we don't want to be loading extension of the knee at that top range because of the risks to the structure. So you've got this kind of shortfall where you don't want to be doing ballistic hyperextension of the knee, but by not doing extension of the knee, you run the risk of destabilizing the entire joint due to VM inadequacy. So one thing to really remember at that top end extension is to make sure that we've got auxiliary work of VM to make sure that that is strengthening while we do these other movements.